When I started this series, I mentioned that there are people who believe that God intervened to save the life of Donald Trump when a 20-year-old man tried to assassinate him from a warehouse rooftop during a campaign stop in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this video, I shall attempt to defend that point of view.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened. My shoes. Let me get my shoes.
I got you, sir. I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes.
Hold on, your head is bloody.
So we got to move to the bus. Move to the bus. Let me get my shoes.
Okay, my shoe down. My shoe.
Watch out.
Wait.
So, that was the incident in question. Even though everyone has probably seen it several times, I think it's worth it to look at it again. In the interest of time, I cut out about 40 seconds or so between the time he was shot and when he was removed from the stage. I'm not hiding anything. The Secret Service was all over him, and the intact video is widely available. I'll even leave a link to the ABC YouTube video if you want to watch the whole thing. I just wanted to show what I consider to be the key elements of what we saw. Namely, the split second Trump turned his head, and then about a minute later when he stood up and was taken from the stage. Now, did we just witness a miracle, as some have suggested? Look again, first at regular speed and then at 1/4 speed.
Months old, and if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Trump turns his head, perhaps a 1/4 second or less, when the bullet nicks his ear. Trajectory analysis shows that had he not turned his head, or had he just held it in a different position, the bullet would have hit his skull. Clearly, I know nothing about ballistics or the medical consequences had candidate Trump not moved his head at that precise moment, but it has been suggested that had a bullet of that high caliber even nicked the bone in his skull, the result could have easily been fatal. So, was it a miracle? Did an angel turn Donald Trump's head at that precise moment in order to save his life? Well, in any case, it certainly could be described as miraculous. A 1 in a billion type thing was how a former Secret Service agent described it. And anyway, how would God signal to us that this human, this Donald Trump, should receive this life-saving blessing and be the beneficiary of a very public miracle? Some might believe that when Trump jumped up after being shot, it was sort of a sword in the stone type moment, that by showing the courage to arise defiantly from the pile of Secret Service agents after coming so close to death, that it was God's way of showing the world that he was the chosen one, the man destined to lead the United States and perhaps the world into the next golden age of human history. It has been widely conceded that most people wouldn't do that, jump up and yell, "Fight, fight, fight," after having a bullet go whizzing by your head. But most people aren't Donald Trump running for president. Still, is this the moment that will live in legend? Just look at these children in Uganda reenacting the events of that afternoon.
Something that said, take a look at what happened.
This was just a few days after the attempt on candidate Trump's life. Well, at least they seem to think that it's the stuff of legend. So what on earth did Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or the mullahs in Iran think when they saw what happened? Of course, they would never admit it, but deep down, did they get a sense that this was a game changer, a supernatural event, and that Trump was the man who was going to be their most formidable counterpart ever? In debate competitions, sometimes sides are required to defend positions that they don't necessarily agree with. At this point, I'm not saying if I agree with the hypothesis or not, but for the purpose of this presentation, I am here to defend the argument that God intervened in the election to save Donald Trump's life. So just to be clear, I shall present many what-ifs and other conjectures for you to ponder. However, in order to continue, we must make some assumptions about God, which is something I am and have always been loath to do. I believe in God, but the concept of the power of God is so vast that I have a difficult time even pretending to understand why He does anything. So, the first assumption to be made is that there are good and bad outcomes, or simply stated, that there is a struggle of good versus evil. And then the next assumption we must make is that God has some interest in the presidential elections of the United States. What might that interest be? Well, what might have been the consequences of Trump's murder anyway? The most obvious one to me is the chaos that would have ensued. There is already massive distrust in our intelligence institutions, and the conspiracy theories that would have emerged had Trump been killed, well, just imagine for yourselves. The United States and possibly the world would have been immersed in a turbulent atmosphere from which it might not have recovered. That could include civil war, given the level of suspicion that exists in the country because of our political differences. That might have even led to a world war. Frankly, I still have lots of questions about that day, and I imagine that I heard a collective cry of shit emanating from many of the powers of corridor in the world when Trump jumped up, bleeding with only an injury to his ear. I mean shit, as in shit, he missed? So was Trump sent to expose what is often referred to as the deep state? That term deep state has a couple of meanings. One of those meanings has also been referred to as the entrenched bureaucracy, public functionaries whose jobs and influence depend on a large and cumbersome government. I'll get back to that later, but they would certainly resist any attempt to curtail their control over our institutions of power. However, here I am referring to another type of deep state. That is a sort of parallel government that secretly wants to enslave us, or at least divide us into those who really rule the world and then the rest of us. That deep state is the conspiracy theorist's wet dream, an enemy of the uninformed public, distracted by planted misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation so they can carry out their insidious plan to subjugate humanity for their own narrow purposes. Who are these people anyway? Are they the Illuminati, the Elders of Zion, or the Tripartite Commission? Are they the World Economic Forum, our own uniparty, that coalition of leadership structures of the Republican and Democratic parties that seek to keep us in a perpetual state of war while they deepen our dependence on big government so that their power can never be challenged? What about the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about? Could our overlords be ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Conoco? Are they the CIA, the NSA, the KGB, or even the TSA? Are they even people, or could they be a species of non-humans who actually control us? Well, the short answer is yes, most likely. That or someone else. I haven't been able to eliminate Google, Microsoft, or Apple from consideration, much less Coca-Cola, so who really knows? But they are the ones who won't come clean about UFOs, zero-point energy, chemtrails, or who killed JFK. They also know who built the pyramids and why we need a 5th season of Stranger Things. Because of them, we are all supposed to get the jab and eat steaks made from mealworms and prairie gnats. Whoever they are, they just want us to shut the f*** up and stop asking so many questions. That is one theory, at least. Let's try on a few more, one by one. Many people believe that Donald Trump, for better or worse, is going to be a transformational president. There is a theory known as the Strauss-Howe generational theory of crisis, which posits that every 80 years or so, after a period of especially divisive global strife, as was World War II, we are led into a period of relative calm and prosperity. I'll leave a link to some information about that if you're interested. Did God send Trump to help guide us through that complicated transformation? One could make the case that because of Trump's lack of filter and his disdain for political correctness, that he is doing serious damage to the trend of woke ideology. As far as I'm concerned, that is God's work. God loves all his children, but he doesn't want us to be stupid. And since we're talking about transformation, what could that entail? At the beginning of Trump's term, Elon Musk, with his team of young and brilliant dodgers, was going to rid our system of waste and fraud. I really wish that had gone a little better, but maybe there's still hope. Does God want us to govern smarter and smaller and have that serve as a model for the world? Stupid government is so universal around the globe that I even consider the term stupid government to be repetitively redundant. Did God save Donald Trump so he could make peace around the world? In a previous video, I quipped that if Trump could make peace in the Middle East, he would be a candidate for sainthood. Everyone knows that he really wants the Nobel Prize, and many believe he deserves it. And as far as miracles, well, I never thought there was any chance in hell that Hamas would release those hostages, and they did. At any rate, I don't think sainthood is in the cards. The Sword in the Stone wasn't about Saint Arthur. It was the legend of King Arthur, so... And except for blowing up a few drug boats and threatening Nicolas Maduro, Trump does talk a lot about wanting peace and prosperity around the world. I believe him when he says that. And by the way, Maduro needs to go. It is also apparently true that the age of artificial intelligence is inevitable. At least that's what they say. You know, those they. Some believe it could launch us into extinction, while others think it might signal our next great evolutionary leap. Well, one thing is certain about AI. It requires an enormous amount of energy to power it, and Trump is the drill baby drill president. Our president seems to be all in with our development of artificial intelligence before the Chinese get it, and frankly, I'm all for that. Did God see that the Democrats would not have gone along with that plan? And what if it's true that we are about to have our first encounter with a non-human intelligence, be they aliens from another planet, dimension, or something else? Well, they have to have someone to talk to when they arrive. God knows, and I mean real God, really knows that Kamala Harris wouldn't have been up to that task. You don't need divine omniscience to see that. I could go on for a long time with my what-ifs, but I bet you get the idea. So now you may be asking yourself, what do I believe? Well, I'm not going to tell you. If you saw my last video in this series, and I hope you did, then you know I don't consider it my place to try to convince you of anything. I think we should all seek a path to God, but I'm not here to start a religion. Before I go, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure and hit the bell to be notified anytime we come out with new content. Finally, as far as God and Trump go, well, who knows? Maybe 1,000 years from now, there will be Trumpian temples all around the world. They would be fabulous temples filled with gold, and everyone would say they are the finest in the world. Truly fantastic. And perhaps there would be a sect of Trumpist monks who spend their days deep in the archives of the ancient Trump Tower, scouring the old hard drives from the 21st century for esoteric wisdom about the Donald. And maybe, just maybe, one of those scholarly monks will come across a piece of digital data from an obscure source, but one that he finds to be especially enlightening, a precious and personal account from someone who bore witness to the events of that most vital segment of history, something he feels must be included in the most important volume of sacred texts. And from that, perhaps we might have the scripture, according to Pablo Molinero. Thanks for watching.